It's funny because you mentioned the idea that you had a lot of people that were close to retirement.
Mhm.
And Austin, you won that job, like I said before, when you were 20 years old. This was like almost 9 years ago now. Is that right?
Yes, it's ninth season now. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, and it's so funny because I vividly remember because you and I think, are about the same age. So
Hmm.
I remember when you won that job that summer, and I saw that we were the same age, and I was like, oh crap, like I'm getting ready for grad school auditions, and this guy already has a job, like, which I mean, in the field of
Wow.
music is like unheard of, but like I feel like even if you were like doing any other major, like it's
Hmm.
unheard of to win a job before you graduate. So like that's
Hmm.
obviously very impressive and it's great. But speaking to that, how can you talk a little bit about how that was in terms of the first couple years adjusting to professional life and leading a group of cellists that I would assume have decades more experience in the professional life, and just how to navigate leading a section like that at such a young age.
Sure. So a lot of it goes back to learning from past mistakes. What I was saying about me being 14 preparing for Rostropovich.
Mm,
Um, the one fantastic quote that a number of people have mentioned in terms of actually getting a job in an orchestra,
mm,
the people who say they know everything actually know nothing, kind of thing. That kind of vibe is the vibe that I tried to hold close to my heart as I approach this, because also I truly felt when I joined the orchestra, like I was saying, even though I was in, being principal of Coburn Orchestra,
mm,
Chicago Youth Symphony before that,
mm,
um, it didn't feel like anything translated. And so
mm,
it felt like, how do you, because if you try to overshow,
mm.
then the section might be like, who the hell does this guy think he is? Like we know how to play on the beat kind of thing.
Mm, mm.
And so a lot of it was encouragement from other principals that had been there a long time.
Sure.
I know, especially right as I joined. I mean, our principal oboe had been there for a few years at that point.
Mm,
She's one. I truly think she's one of the best principal oboists in the country.
mm,
And our principal trumpet, who also I would say is one of the best principal trumpets in the country,
mm,
who's
mm,
now doing a year co-principal with Pittsburgh.
mm,
Um, they both kind of, I know, kind of navigating this around the same time, because
mm,
I think there's been, even in their sections where it might not be as big of an age difference, I think there's a little bit of that, like, how do you tell somebody who's been here much longer than you,
mm.
we need to play better together, kind of thing.
Right,
So I
right.
think a lot of it was a very gradual change. And
Mm,
so a lot of it was finding the strengths of each individual player, in terms of
mm,
at least what section that I wanted to create, what kind of culture that I wanted to create, finding the
mm,
strengths of each individual player and personally encouraging those strengths.
mm.
For example, there might be a player, and this is not tied to any one person, it's
Sure,
just an
sure,
example.
sure.
There might be one player who might rush like crazy, but have
Mm,
the most gorgeous sound in the world. A
right.
lot of it would be, just encouraging that sound, that like I
Mm,
want us to have that sound,
mm,
while also focusing much more on really kind of marinating in that sound. That's a really bad way to describe it. Basically, just like sitting in that sound, um, as a way to also disencourage rushing, kind of thing.
mm,
And so
mm.
kind of getting to know each individual section player, um, and in a, as I said, it sounds very manipulative, but at the same time, it's kind of like crafting, but also making sure that you don't overstep as well, because there's an idea that because you're principal, you can do whatever you want,
Mm,
which is absolutely not true.
mm,
You still have to behave with respect. You're still a cellist as they are cellists. The
mm,
only thing that kind of differentiates you is you have more responsibilities,
mm.
and also when it comes down to some artistic decision, you just have to make a decision.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it was the first couple of years I would, I have since kind of phased this out a little bit,
Mm,
but if there's a bowing that I haven't decided between during a break, I'd be like, hey, do you guys have a preference if we start on down or up,
mm,
kind of thing. And so sometimes people felt very strongly about it. I
mm.
find I tried that a couple times when we hired some new people, and they're like, whatever you want to do, kind of
Yeah,
thing, we can make it happen, which is
yeah.
kind of the mentality that I like, because I like a flexible section.
Sure.
um, and so a lot of it was, over time, as the people would retire,
Mm,
I would try to keep that same sound and that same culture, which has been very difficult since COVID, because we had a year and a half of just not playing, and then we
mm.
had like four people suddenly get replaced.
Right.
And so a lot of it was just deferring to people's opinions.
Mm,
For example, I know. one story that I really like to tell is an Indiana Jones Pops concert. I looked at the part and I saw the bowing that was on there. I was like, we can do a much better bowing than this. So I
Right.
changed all the parts. I thought I was being a very good principal. I didn't even
Mhm.
like present it because what the library can do is if you are like, hey, I have this page or this piece that I want to change all the bowings in,
Mhm.
and you give them enough time, they're like, yeah, we can change some of the parts for you. But I was
Mhm.
being a good citizen. I was like, no, I'll change some of the parts. So we get to the first rehearsal, and right before the downbeats, right before the tuning starts,
Mhm.
I hear one of my very, very good friends say from the back of the orchestra, "Who the hell changed these bowings?" And like I was terrified because I was like,
Mhm.
"That's me." But her point was like they had been playing this since like however whenever the original Indiana Jones came out in like the 80s or the 90s.
Mhm.
They'd been
Mhm.
playing it. This was the original sheet music from when they got it gifted by John Williams because they
Oh
had an
wow.
arrangement where they proofread a lot of the parts. So like for example, ET's the suite that you hear a lot of times orchestras play with ET.
Mhm.
The ISO actually proofed that right
Mhm.
when it came out before it was put for release, and they got a free set of parts as a thank you.
Oh
Um,
wow.
so for I think a lot of that has to do with our pops conductor Jack Everly is an incredibly sweet and gracious and amazingly talented pops conductor, and he's uh, rather close with John Williams and John Williams'
Mhm.
team. So he was able to pull some strings on that kind of stuff, and
Mhm.
John Williams trusts us enough to do that kind of stuff. But
Mhm.
yeah, I guess to stop going on tangents, the main thing essentially would be um, having a foresight or a clarity of thought to
Mhm.
know and to be confident when you have a reason to be confident. If you feel strongly about something, be confident,
Mhm.
don't back down.
Mhm.
Obviously, be respectful and be polite.
Yeah.
But a lot of times it was just a matter of learning from the experiences that people have had. Because the thing is, everybody has made certain mistakes. Everybody's had that thing where, let's say a colleague has played really out of tune, and
Mhm.
then you go up to them and you actually mention directly intonation, just like, "Hey, we need to play better in tune," kind of, or
Mhm.
like I think the wording I used when I was 20 was like, "Hey, I think you're just a little bit flat here.
Mhm.
Try to bring it up," kind of thing,
Mhm.
which is might not sound like a bad thing to say,
Right.
but if you have somebody come to you like, "Hey, you're flat," it all is like you're flat. You feel like people can easily be attacked
Right. Right.
that way, and so a lot of it is like I just get the sections that go, hey, I don't think we're really matching intonation here on
Mhm.
this E flat. Let's make sure to constantly be adjusting. Let's listen to the
Mhm.
horns, and even if
Right.
they're a little bit sharp, let's make sure to just adjust a little bit up to that kind of thing. So it's all
Right.
about we versus telling them what to do, and I think that's kind of more of the what I've learned with playing with a lot of the more senior members of the cello
Mhm.
section when I first joined. It's just like this is a group thing. This is
Mhm.
not me telling people what to do,
Yeah.
basically.
No, and I think, I mean, from afar, because I see your social media posts.
Mhm.
It seems like you've done a really good job of that recently, especially because I know that you guys play a lot of cello ensemble music with the whole
Mhm.
section, and I
Yeah.
mean, I'm sure that's made a little bit easier considering how everyone's a little bit younger or like around the same
Mhm.
age, so it makes it easier to create that kind of harmony and schedule. So no, I think you're
Yeah.
doing a really good job of that, and that's
Oh,
really
thank you.
that's fantastic. Yeah, because I mean, I'm trying to think. Aside from like Berlin, I don't think a lot of orchestras do like cello ensemble stuff, as far as I
A lot
can.
of them do like one-offs. Like I know, talking with Rayner, the new principal of San Francisco,
Mhm.
we were talking about Utah, and
Mhm.
it just came up that Utah did a cello ensemble concert right as we were programming our cello ensemble concert. So
Oh.
we were able to steal some ideas from there, and they sounded
Mhm.
fantastic too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it does absolutely help the
Yeah.
camaraderie. It
Right.
also helps because let's say you play Brahms Second Symphony, Second Movement in an actual orchestra.
Right.
It's hard unless the conductor, which I found the conductor actually, they're usually very generous with their time in terms of fixing stuff with this.
Mhm. Mhm.
But it's a lot better if we play, for example, we played Foray Pavane and
Mhm.
Charlie Chaplin's Smile,
Mhm.
which might not seem like there's so much of Brahms too, but a lot of the phrasing ideas, a lot of the kind of sound structures that we want in Brahms too
Mhm.
are in those pieces, and we can much kind of work on them in a much deeper sense rather than just kind of hoping that the conductor fixes it. Because also during rehearsal, I can make little comments like I can be like, "Hey, let's make sure we phrase to here,"
Mhm.
or "Let's follow this articulation," and little things like that.
Mhm.
But playing in a cello ensemble lets us actually work, and also people in the section can make suggestions as well,
Right.
because there is still a little bit of a power dynamic that needs
Mhm.
to be respected. Like
Mhm.
I can make authoritative decisions,
Mhm.
um, and people will follow them, which is
Mhm.
I am very happy they will.
Mhm.
No meets and easy yet, and so but then as it goes down, the title shares associate can make those, and assistant can make those in kind of, I guess, in that order. But technically, being a principal, I can still technically veto that, even though I don't think I've really vetoed anything in
Mhm.
general level like
Mhm.
that. But if you're a section player, it has to be a much kind of thinner ice to walk on. But
Mhm.
it's still very much encouraged. But
Mhm.
again, even more so, for example, we have a lot of young cellists, and I kind of saying that story about like talking about us, we,
Mhm.
that idea.
Right.
There were a couple of people who I was in the room when they made that mistake that I made as well, saying like, "Hey, I think you're accenting this part," and I was just
Mhm.
like, this is a teachable moment because I made this exact same mistake, and I felt absolutely terribly for doing that once I realized what I was doing.
Mhm.
So, and I think it's also a matter of it's not my responsibility, and these people can grow by themselves just fine.
Mhm.
But it's really fulfilling to see the section grow and to help encourage that as well,
Right.
because there's kind of a golden uh, how to put it. There's a sweet spot in terms of you want the section to be athletic and to be technically incredibly sound, but
Mhm.
you want them to have a lot of experience where you don't have to worry about little basic things like rushing or
Right.
dragging or making a harsh sound or anything like that.
Mhm.
um, but you also don't want to go past that spectrum,
Mhm.
which right now I think that because also once we get past that spectrum, we'll have the same problem that the ISO did recently, where everybody retires at the same time as long as
Mhm.
everybody stays in the orchestra because they're all, I would say, besides one member, we're all within like 4 or 5 years of each other.
Oh,
So
wow. Mm.
it makes it'll be tricky in the 2050s maybe.
There'll be like seven new auditions like, or jobs opening up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.